Gentlemen, it's me, your boy, the average military music enjoyer. On this show, we're going to talk about everything from ancient Byzantine war chants to modern marching cadences. And believe me, there's some bops in there. So join me today as we talk about one of my favorites, My Little Armalite. So the point of this series is to take a look at different military songs from history and try to give a little bit more context and maybe even spotlight some forgotten gems. Because military music has this way of capturing a time period and the attitude of people. And we'll get into that, that idea of, does this really capture the time period? Does this really capture the attitude of the fighting men? We'll get into that. But overall, think of this as a music class or some sort of music appreciation, but just for the boys. So now for some actual history on the song. It was written during the early 70s during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Which, if you're not really aware, I'll try my best to sum it up for you, but I really don't like summing up conflicts because I feel like they're a lot more complicated. So during the Troubles, the northern portion of Ireland was occupied by the British military, and a lot of local Protestants liked this. They thought they were there to keep the peace, while a lot of traditionalist Catholics and nationalist Irishmen didn't like this idea of foreigners being inside their country. And that's making it seem very clear-cut that it was just Irishmen resisting British occupation. But in a lot of ways, it was far more complex. The IRA had a lot of infighting about what type of government they were fighting for. And so there actually ended up being a few different branches of the IRA. But for the context of this song, we're talking about the Provisional IRA, which tends to be the one that most people think of. And in the early days, the IRA was not doing too well, mostly because they were poorly armed. But in Derry in early 1972, the IRA actually barely had any weapons in their stockhold. One estimate says 6 M1 carbines, 2 Thompsons, 1 or 2 M1 Grand rifles, and a variety of handguns. But the men of the IRA were not dumb. They realized very quickly that to beat the British Army militarily, they had to be able to compete, and so they secretly began to import weaponry from the United States, and most notably, the Armalite rifle. And the Armalite rifle can refer to a few different ones. Originally it referred to the AR-18, but they began to import AR-15s, M16s, over 1,000 different rifles. Eventually they got Simtex, heavy machine guns, surface-to-air missiles, flamethrowers, you name it, the IRA had. And that's the namesake of the song, this idea that through the Armalite rifle, the IRA became, if not equal, close to the British Army, and were able to fight them with similar weapons. Now that we've discussed a bit of the history, let's take a look at the lyrics and break them down and see if we can understand what they're talking about. The song opens with the chorus, and it's down along the Falls Road. That's where I long to be, lying in the dark with a Provo company, a comrade on my left and another on my right, and a clip of ammunition for my little Armalite. Our narrator then goes on to tell us, I was stopped by a soldier. He said, "You are a swine." He hit me with his rifle and he kicked me in the groin. I begged and I pleaded. Sure, my manners were polite, but all the time I'm thinking of my little Armalite. So our narrator's describing the situation where he's walking to work, or maybe he's walking through a checkpoint. A soldier stops him, insults him, beats him to the ground. He's begging and pleading for his life. But all the time, he's thinking inside his head, just wait till I get my rifle. In the next line after the chorus, we get to see what happens when our narrator gets his rifle. Sure, a brave RUC man came marching up our street. 600 British soldiers he had lined up at his feet. Come out, ye cowardly Fenians. Come on out and fight. But he cried, I'm only joking, when he heard the Armalite. So our narrator tells us that walking up his street comes a very large British patrol led by a brave RUC man. The RUC was the police force that occupied Northern Ireland and was loyal to the crown. And he calls out to the IRA saying, come out, you cowards, come out and fight. And he's brave because he's with all these armed soldiers, but as soon as they hear the fire from the Armalite, he says, I'm only joking, I I didn't actually want to fight. And then the narrator describes when the army comes to look for him. He says, "Well, the army came to visit me was in the early hours, with Saracens and Saladins and ferret-armored cars. They thought they had me cornered, but I gave them all a fright with the armor-piercing bullets of my little Armalite." So the narrator describes the army coming for him with, all the armored fighting vehicles, Saracens, Saladins, ferrets, and the British are thinking, "Yeah, we got this guy." He says they had me cornered, but there they are inside their armored fighting vehicles and seeing the holes being ripped in the side of them from the armor-piercing bullets. He goes on to say, "Well, when Pryor came to Belfast to see the battles won, the generals they had told him, 'We've got them on the run.' But corporals and privates, while on patrol at night, say, 'Remember narrow water and the bloody Armalite.'" So this line is in reference to Jim Pryor, who was the leader of the House of Commons in England, and he was a pretty conservative British politician who wanted to see the IRA put down, obviously. And all of the brass and senior military officials had told him, don't worry, man, we got this. The IRA are done. But if you pull those, lower enlisted, they're saying, "Fuck no, we're not winning this thing." They talk about narrow water, which was near, it was a ambush near the Narrow Water Castle, or sometimes called the Warren Point ambush, and it was the deadliest attack by the Provisional IRA on the British military. So they're saying, "No, we're not winning. God, no." In that last line, say, "Remember narrow water and the bloody Armalite," you put this idea in your head that the Armalite was the thing that they feared the most, the thing that made the IRA equal to them, that they weren't fighting these men with pitchforks anymore. These were men with modern weapons. It does a good job of selling that idea. And it's down in Crossmaglen is where I long to be, lying in the dark with the Provo Company, a comrade on me left and another one on me right, and a clip of ammunition for me little Armalite. So, what do I think of the song in conclusion? I think the song does a really good job of setting the scene, getting inside the head of the average IRA soldier. They're tired of the British Army and they just want to go out there and fight them. So it's a cool idea that the IRA is this one-man army that's out here to fight armored cars and hundreds of British soldiers, and the RUC is a bunch of cowards. So I get it. It's a cool look into the mind of the average, traditionalist Irishman at the time. I don't think it's a realistic depiction of combat during the Troubles, which it's not supposed to. But in a sense, that's a more realistic depiction because the Troubles were super amped up to both sides thinking this is the World War III in our country. But it never got to that large scale. But it was horrific. The idea of people gunning each other down in the streets and soldiers pulling people out of arms. Super shitty time. That doesn't need to be restated here by some idiot in a balaclava in a basement. But anyway, it's a pretty cool song. It bops, it slaps, it's bussin', whatever you cool kids want to say. And I hope that you learned something from this because it was a lot of fun talking about this song. We're going to talk a lot of other topics, not just IRA tunes. I do have a big interest in the Troubles. We're going to talk a lot of different time periods, like I said before. So if you like this type of thing, please subscribe, stick around. We got a lot more of this shit to go. So I'm Spud. Thanks for joining me for the first episode of Songs of Soldiers and Sailors, and we'll see you later.